Hi everyone, I'm Elon Musk. Today I want to share something I believe is extremely important, not just for building companies, but for changing the way you see the world. It's called asterisk, asterisk, first principles thinking. Asterisk, asterisk. Most people think by analogy. They look around and they say, other people are doing it this way, so that must be the right way. And honestly, for most areas of life, that's not wrong. If you're learning how to cook, it makes sense to follow a recipe. If you're learning how to drive, you copy what other drivers do. That's safe, efficient, and it works. But here's the problem. If you only ever think by analogy, you'll never create anything truly new. At best, you'll make small improvements. A car that's a little faster, a phone that's a little thinner, a computer that's a little cheaper, that's fine, but it's not enough if the mission is bigger. If you want to send human beings to Mars, if you want to make an electric car that actually beats gasoline cars in performance and price, if you want to fundamentally change the future, analogy thinking will not get you there. Because analogy is just copying the past. It's like living inside someone else's box and decorating the walls, but never leaving the box. You can't innovate if you never step outside. To go further, you need to think from first principles. Now, what does that mean? It means you break things down to their fundamental truths, truths that cannot be argued with, things that are based on physics, on reality, on undeniable facts, and then you build back up from those truths. Let me give you an example. When people said electric cars were impossible, they were thinking by analogy. They said batteries are too expensive. They've always been too expensive, therefore they will always be too expensive. That's analogy. That's history thinking. But if you think from first principles, you ask a different question. You ask, what is a battery really? What materials go into it? What do those materials actually cost on the market? And then you realize the raw materials are not that expensive. The gap between material cost and market price was not a law of physics. It was a problem of process and design. That's the moment innovation becomes possible. Because once you see the truth clearly, you realize that the limits you thought were permanent are not permanent at all. They're just conventions. They're just habits. And habits can be changed. This is why first principles thinking matters so much. It's not just about technology. It's about how we see problems in life, in business, in society. If you always assume the world must stay the way it is, because that's how it's been, then nothing big will ever change. But if you strip a problem down to reality itself, if you look at what's absolutely true, you can rebuild from the ground up. And from there, almost anything is possible. What is first principles thinking? First principles thinking means looking at a problem from its most fundamental truth, instead of relying on assumptions, habits, or what others have done before. It's about breaking down a complex problem into the simplest, undeniable facts, and then rebuilding your solution from those basic truths. Most people tend to think by analogy. We compare, we imitate, and we assume that what worked for others will also work for us. For example, if a company succeeds by running Facebook ads, we might think we should do the same. But that's imitation, not innovation. Thinking from first principles forces you to go deeper. You ask yourself, why did they choose to do it that way? What is the real essence of this problem? Which parts are absolutely unchangeable? And if I started from zero with no rules, no traditions, how would I solve it? This mindset requires independent analysis, curiosity, and the courage to question everything, even the things everyone else takes for granted. It pushes you to strip away illusions and discover the real mechanics of how the world works. When you think from first principles, you're no longer limited by convention. You see possibilities that others overlook because they're trapped inside old patterns. That's the difference between incremental improvement and true innovation. Improvement means polishing what already exists. Innovation means rebuilding the entire system from the ground up. It's how great inventors, scientists, and entrepreneurs, from Aristotle to Elon Musk, have changed the world by questioning assumptions and thinking from first principles. A simple example, the electric car battery. Let's take a simple but powerful example, the electric car battery. When I first started working on Tesla, everyone said the same thing. Electric cars can never be affordable. The batteries are just too expensive. That sounded reasonable, but I didn't want to accept it blindly. So I asked why. People replied because lithium-ion batteries cost about $600 per kilowatt hour. That's just how the industry works. And that's a classic example of thinking by analogy, assuming that what is true today will always be true tomorrow. They accepted the current price as if it were a law of nature. But first principles thinking doesn't accept assumptions as truth. So I asked another question, what is a battery actually made of? The answer was simple, cobalt, nickel, lithium, carbon, and a little bit of polymer for separation. Nothing magical, just raw materials, chemistry, and engineering. Then I asked, what if we buy these materials in their basic form, how much would they really cost? When we ran the numbers, we were shocked. The raw materials only added up to around $80 per kilowatt hour. So where did the rest of the money go? It went into manufacturing inefficiencies, outdated designs, old supply chains, and most of all, the belief that this is just how things are. And that's the turning point. When you think from first principles, you strip away every assumption, every limit imposed by habit or history. You realize that high cost isn't a law of physics, it's a limit of human thinking. From that insight, we completely redesigned the battery process from the materials and cell structure to the assembly line itself. Step by step, we rebuilt everything based on physics and logic, not tradition. The result? Tesla batteries became cheaper, stronger, and more efficient, not because we copied others, but because we dared to ask a different question. And it all started with one simple thought: why does it have to be this way? That's the power of first principles thinking. It doesn't just create innovation, it changes the way you see the world. 3 steps to think from first principles. So how do you actually think from first principles? It sounds abstract, but it can be trained. There are 3 simple steps you can start with. Step 1, identify the real problem. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to solve? Most people confuse symptoms with root causes. For example, saying, my company's sales are slow isn't the real problem, it's just a symptom. The real issue might be something deeper, like our product doesn't truly solve the customer's need. When you define the problem correctly, half the battle is already won. Because if you chase the wrong problem, no amount of effort will lead to the right solution. Step 2, break it down to the most basic truths. Now, peel the problem apart piece by piece until only the undeniable truths remain. Ask what is absolutely true here, and just as important, what's only an assumption made by people. For instance, people often say, I need to work 8 hours a day to be successful. But is that a natural law? Of course not. That's a social construct, not a universal truth. Once you separate truth from assumption, you free your mind to see things as they really are. Step 3, rebuild from the ground up. Now comes the creative part. With the core truths in hand, imagine you're starting fresh, no history, no traditions, no limits. If you could design the world from zero, how would you solve this problem? This is where logic meets imagination. You're no longer fixing what's broken. You're rebuilding what's possible. That's how innovators think. They don't ask, how can I make this slightly better? They ask, what would this look like if we started from scratch? First principles thinking isn't just a method, it's a mindset. It pushes you to challenge what everyone else accepts, to see beyond the surface, and to create something entirely new. It's how progress happens one person, one question, and one clear thought at a time. Physics and thinking from first principles. Before I studied business, I studied physics. And physics teaches you something fundamental. To understand the true nature of things, you don't rely on opinions, you rely on proof. You don't accept, that's just how it is. You ask why, again and again, until you hit a physical truth. That's the essence of first principles thinking. Taking the spirit of physics and applying it to everything, and even to your personal life. Because physics doesn't care what people believe, it only cares about what's true, and that mindset changes everything. A second example, SpaceX and the cost of rockets. When we started SpaceX, everyone told us the same thing. Building rockets is the most expensive thing in the world. Only governments can do it. So naturally, I asked why. They said because rockets are single use. Every launch costs hundreds of millions of dollars. And I asked again, why do they have to be single use? Airplanes don't get thrown away after one flight, do they? If we could reuse rockets, how much would the cost drop? Almost everyone laughed. They said, that's impossible. No one has ever done that. We chose a different path. We looked at the physics of the problem. We asked, can a rocket physically land again if you control the thrust vector precisely enough? Can the guidance systems manage that level of accuracy? And when we realized that no law of physics forbade it, the challenge became purely one of engineering and persistence. Once something doesn't break the laws of physics, it's possible. It may be hard, it may take years, but it's possible. So we built, tested, failed, and tried again, over and over. Until one day, a rocket actually came back from space and landed upright on Earth. The result? SpaceX became the first company in history to reuse orbital rockets, cutting launch costs by nearly 90%. Not because we were smarter than everyone else, but because we asked a more fundamental question. Physics teaches you to think this way. It reminds you that progress doesn't come from doing what's already been done. It comes from challenging what everyone assumes to be true. That's the power of thinking from first principles. It's not just a mental model. It's a way of seeing reality as it truly is. And when you see the world through that lens, you realize there are no impossible problems. There are only problems we haven't understood deeply enough yet. The first principles mindset in personal life, asterisk, asterisk, first principles thinking, isn't just for scientists or entrepreneurs. It's a way of seeing the world clearly. It's the habit of asking, what's actually true, instead of what does everyone else believe? Most people live by imitation. They follow what others do not, because it's right, but because it's common. But progress never comes from imitation, it comes from questioning. Take a simple example. Is greater than, I can't learn programming because I'm bad at math. Sounds reasonable, but is it true? Programming isn't about complex math, it's about solving problems, thinking logically, and learning how systems work. Once you see that, the fear disappears. You realize the real barrier wasn't ability, it was an assumption. The same happens in other areas of life. Is greater than, I can't start a business because I don't have money, is greater than. But is money really the first requirement? Is greater than, or is it understanding a need, creating value, and being willing to test ideas cheaply? When you question the assumption, new paths appear. First principles thinking helps you see that most limits aren't physical, they're mental. Even career choices are full of untested beliefs. Is greater than, I should pick a stable job. Is greater than, but what does stable mean in a world that changes every year? Is greater than. Maybe true stability comes from adaptability, not routine. When you start to think from first principles, you stop living someone else's story. You stop asking, what should I do?
And start asking, what's really true for me? That's when creativity replaces fear and your decisions begin to reflect understanding, not imitation.
How to practice first principles thinking. This mindset takes practice. It's not about intelligence, it's about curiosity. You build it by constantly separating asterisk, asterisk, facts, asterisk, asterisk, from asterisk, asterisk, beliefs, asterisk, 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 truths, asterisk, asterisk, from asterisk, asterisk, tradition, asterisk, asterisk. Step one, question assumptions. Whenever you hear, that's just how things are. Pause and ask, is greater than why, is greater than, is it always true, is greater than what law of nature says it must be this way. Step two, find the fundamentals. Distinguish what's times objectively true times from what's times socially accepted, asterisk. Gravity is a fact, work 9 to 5 to succeed is not. When you can tell the difference, you gain clarity and freedom. Step three, rebuild from zero. After removing assumptions, ask, if I was starting fresh, how would I design this? That question activates creativity. You're no longer improving the old way, you're inventing a new one. So next time someone says, is greater than, that's impossible. Is greater than, just smile and ask, is greater than impossible according to what rule? Because once you start thinking from first principles, asterisk impossible times is just another belief waiting to be challenged. When not to use first principles thinking, let's be honest, you don't need to reinvent everything. There are moments when first principles thinking isn't the smartest path, it's the slowest. If a solution already works, is safe and affordable, use it. There's no wisdom in rebuilding what already functions perfectly. The purpose of first principles thinking is not to reject human knowledge, but to look beyond its boundaries when progress stops. You must learn to choose your battles. If you're running a small startup, you don't need to redesign the screw, the chair, or the light bulb. Use the tools that already exist. They represent centuries of collective knowledge. Don't waste energy fighting solved problems. But if you dream of sending humans to Mars, you can't rely on what's been done before. You can't say this is how rockets have always worked, because how it's always been is exactly what prevents what could be. The art lies in knowing when to follow and when to rethink. There's a time to stand on the shoulders of giants, and a time to climb higher, even if the air gets thin. So don't use first principles to rebel for the sake of rebellion. Use it to pierce through limits that no longer make sense. It's not about rejecting the past, it's about transcending it. Overcoming the fear of thinking differently. Now, here's the real challenge. Most people don't fail to think independently because they can't. They fail because they're afraid. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of standing out. Afraid of being laughed at by people who never dared to try. When you think differently, you step outside the comfort of the crowd, and the crowd will always try to pull you back. Every great innovation began with someone who was mocked. When we said at SpaceX that we would land rockets, people laughed out loud. Experts said it was impossible, that physics wouldn't allow it. So when we said we would make electric cars desirable and affordable, they said, that's crazy, nobody wants that. When we said we'd build reusable spacecraft and aim for Mars, they called it fantasy. But if you understand the fundamentals, if you've examined the physics, the logic, the core truth, you don't need permission from the crowd. You just need to be right. Because the truth is independent of popularity. It doesn't ask for approval, it just works. And that's the beauty of first principles thinking. It replaces belief with understanding and fear with clarity. Yes, thinking differently will often make you feel alone, but solitude is the birthplace of originality. Every revolutionary idea starts as a minority opinion until it becomes reality. So when others laugh, don't shrink. To think from first principles is to walk ahead of your time, and that always feels uncomfortable right up until the moment the world catches up. The essence of creativity. People often think creativity means making something completely new, but that's a myth. Nothing in the universe is truly new. Everything is made of pieces that already exist. True creativity is about understanding those pieces deeply and combining them in a way no one has before. Think of Lego bricks. Every brick is old, simple, familiar. But when you rearrange them, you can build a house, a bridge, or a rocket. The magic isn't in the bricks, it's in the arrangement. First principles thinking trains your mind to see the bricks clearly, to strip away illusions, assumptions, and labels, until all that remains are the basic elements of reality. The painter doesn't invent colors, he combines them differently. The musician doesn't invent notes, she arranges them in new harmony. The engineer doesn't invent atoms, he rearranges them into technology. That's what creation truly is, seeing what everyone else sees, but thinking what no one else has thought. When you practice first principles thinking, you become an architect of reality, not just a user of it. Real-world examples. Let's take a few examples where this mindset can reshape entire industries and even daily life. Housing costs. People often say homes are expensive because land is expensive. But is that a law of nature or just human convention? Land is expensive because of policy, zoning, and speculation, not physics. So let's ask, what is the true purpose of a home? A home isn't a piece of land, it's a safe, comfortable space for living. Once you define it that way, the old equation breaks. Maybe housing could be 3D printed. Maybe modular homes can be mass-produced like cars. Maybe we can rethink location-built communities in underused areas where cost doesn't equal quality of life. When you challenge the assumption, you discover that expensive housing isn't a law, it's a choice. Education, so another common belief, to be successful, you must go to university for 4 years. But what's the essence of education? It's not sitting in a classroom, it's acquiring knowledge and skill. If that's the goal, then online courses, real-world projects, and mentorship can achieve the same, often better results. Learning has evolved, but our systems haven't. Universities were built in an age when books were rare and teachers were few. Today, knowledge is free, abundant, and accessible anywhere. So if we design education from first principles today, would we still make it 4 years, one location, one curriculum for everyone? Probably not. First principles thinking doesn't destroy education, it helps reinvent it for the modern world. Urban transportation, and what about traffic? People say traffic jams are just part of city life. But let's analyze the physics. Congestion happens because too many vehicles share the same 2D surface. That's not destiny, that's geometry. So what if movement could happen on multiple layers underground or above ground? What if we stopped thinking in flat maps and started thinking in 3D mobility? That's why the Boring Company exists, not to make more roads, but to rethink how we use space for movement. Once you understand the geometry of traffic, you realize it's not a social problem, it's a spatial one. That's solvable. Personal productivity, even on an individual level, first principles thinking applies. Many people say, I need to work 8 hours a day to be successful. But is success measured by hours or by outcomes? Maybe the most productive schedule for you isn't 8 to 5. Maybe it's 2 intense hours of deep work and time for recovery. Productivity isn't about following a schedule. It's about optimizing energy and focus. By questioning even your daily routines, you find what truly matters and what's just tradition in disguise, the balance between discovery and wisdom. So yes, there are moments when you should question everything and others when you should trust what works. Both are part of wisdom. The best innovators know when to use existing knowledge and when to transcend it. Think of it this way, knowledge is the foundation. First principles thinking is the elevator. Without the foundation, you fall. Without the elevator, you stay on the same floor forever. Closing thoughts, first principles thinking is not rebellion for its own sake. It's a disciplined form of curiosity, the courage to look beyond surface answers, and the patience to rebuild truth from the ground up. When you live this way, you stop asking, what should I believe? And start asking, what's actually true? You stop saying, that's impossible, and start saying, according to what law? You stop fearing what others think, and start trusting what you know to be real. That's how civilizations move forward, one question, one insight, one bold thinker at a time. Because in the end, progress doesn't belong to those who follow the rules. It belongs to those who understand them deeply enough to rewrite them. So the next time someone says, that's just how things are, pause, look closer, and ask, but why does it have to be that way? That single question has changed the world before, and it will. The power of starting over When you look at a problem as if it's never been solved before, you free yourself from all inherited limits. You reset every assumption that has quietly shaped your thinking. It's like a child asking, why is the sky blue? The child doesn't care about being wrong. And that's exactly why they learn faster than adults. As we grow up, we build invisible walls made of assumptions, things we never question because they've always just been that way. But those invisible walls are the reason progress slows. First principles thinking is the tool that breaks those chains. When you start from zero, when you truly begin again, you see the world as it really is, not as someone told you it was. That's where all genuine innovation begins, at the point where you stop accepting and start observing. To start over is not to erase the past, it's to liberate yourself from its unexamined weight. Every great leap in science, in art, in human thought has come from someone bold enough to begin again. The Wright brothers started over from the laws of flight. Einstein started over from the laws of time. And every person who dares to question reality as it's handed to them is, in a sense, starting over too. That's the true power of this mindset. When you have the courage to start again, you stop being trapped by what should be and start building what could be. Daily practice, for me, first principles thinking isn't just a theory, it's a habit. Every day, I take a few minutes to ask myself questions like, what do I believe is true, but might actually be wrong? What am I doing only because everyone else does it? If I had to rebuild this from scratch, what would I do differently? These sound like small questions, but they have enormous power. Because the moment you answer them honestly, you realize how much of your life is built on assumption, not understanding. Most people don't stop to think. They repeat. They inherit routines, ideas, and fears without ever asking where they came from. But when you make questioning a daily ritual, you start to see patterns others miss. You learn faster, adapt faster, and evolve faster. Even 5 minutes of deep questioning a day can shift the direction of your entire future. It's not about being skeptical of everything, it's about being curious about why things are the way they are. Curiosity is not a childish trait, it's the raw material of intelligence. And when you feed it every day, your mind becomes stronger, sharper, freer. So don't just admire first principles thinking, practice it, not once a year, not once a project, but every day, in small, quiet moments of reflection. Ask, doubt, rebuild. That's how growth really happens. Conclusion, returning to the essence. When you strip away every assumption, every tradition, every inherited belief, you're left with truth, and from truth you can build anything. First principles thinking doesn't promise that the path will be easy, but it guarantees that your understanding will be real. And once you understand something at its core, fear disappears. That's how I approach everything I do. Electric vehicles from the physics of energy and materials, rockets from the principles of motion and combustion, artificial intelligence from the structure of learning itself, and the future from what cannot be denied. When you build from truth, you no longer depend on luck or imitation. You create from clarity. And clarity is power. The future doesn't belong to those who ask, what have others done before me? It belongs to those who ask, what is actually true? Because truth is the most reliable foundation in the universe. It never changes, never lies, never bends to opinion. So if you truly want to change the world, don't start from tradition. Don't start from imitation. Start from truth. Start from the unshakable laws of reality. Start from the courage to think for yourself. Start from zero and build upward. That's how humanity moves forward. That's how impossible things become real. And that's how, one question at a time, you begin to shape the future, not as it is, but as it could be.